He said it without flinching. I want a son, but not with you. She was 6 months pregnant. He threw her into the rain like she was nothing. 6 years later, he found out she gave birth to twins, his twins, and he never knew. One of them is dying. Only he can save him. But she isn't begging anymore. She's the one holding all the cards now. And her condition? It will destroy him. 6 years ago. Soul rain hammered the windows of the penthouse like accusation. Minji stood in the center of the marble floor, her hands trembling over the slight curve of her belly. 6 months. She had waited until now to tell him, thinking maybe, just maybe, it would soften him. She was wrong. Kang Ji-won sat across from her, perfectly still. His suit was black. His expression was stone. The kind of man who ruled the Seoul underworld without raising his voice. The kind of man who made people disappear with a single nod. Her husband. "You're pregnant," he said. It wasn't a question. "Yes." Her voice cracked. "I wanted to tell you..." "How long?" 6 months. Silence. Then he stood. Slow. Controlled. Terrifying. "I told you from the beginning, Minji. I need an heir. A son strong enough to inherit my empire. This is your child, but not from the right woman." The words cut deeper than any blade. She stared at him, disbelief flooding her chest. "What are you saying?" He didn't look at her. He looked past her, through her. "You were convenient, obedient. But I made a mistake marrying you. You're not the mother my son deserves." Her knees almost buckled. "Ji-won, please. Pack your things." "What?" "You have 1 hour." Her breath stopped. "You're throwing me out?" He finally met her eyes. Cold, empty, final. "I'm setting you free. You'll be compensated. But the child you're carrying..." He paused. "I'll arrange for a doctor. You'll terminate it." "No." The word ripped out of her. "No?" His brow lifted, almost amused. "I won't kill my baby. Then you leave with nothing." Silence swallowed the room. Minji's tears blurred her vision, but her hands pressed protectively over her belly. "You'll regret this." He turned his back on her. "I never regret anything." Present day, New York City. Ji-won's phone buzzed during a meeting. He ignored it. It buzzed again. His second-in-command, Seo-jun, leaned in. "Sir, it's marked urgent." From a hospital in New York. Ji-won's jaw tightened. He never got calls from hospitals. He stepped out of the room, pressed the phone to his ear. "Mr. Kang Ji-won?" "Speaking." "This is Dr. Patel from Mount Sinai Hospital. We're contacting you regarding a patient, Kim Minji." The name hit him like a freight train. Minji. His chest tightened, though his face remained blank. He hadn't heard that name in 6 years. "What about her?" "She listed you as an emergency contact. We need to inform you that her son, Kim Ha-jun, is in critical condition. He has acute myeloid leukemia and requires an urgent bone marrow transplant." Ji-won's mind went still. "Son. I'm sorry, there must be a mistake. I don't have..." "Mr. Kang, Ms. Kim gave birth to twins 6 years ago, Ha-jun and Seo-yun. You're listed as the biological father." The floor dropped out from under him. Twins. He had twins. And one of them was dying. Ji-won landed in New York 18 hours later. The hospital smelled like disinfectant and desperation. His footsteps echoed down the sterile hallway, flanked by 2 bodyguards who kept their distance. He didn't feel like a king here. He felt like a ghost. Dr. Patel met him outside the pediatric oncology wing. She was small, sharp-eyed, efficient. "Mr. Kang, thank you for coming." "Where is he?" "Room 408. But first, I need to explain." "I'll see him first." She hesitated, then nodded. Ji-won pushed open the door. The room was dim. Machines beeped softly. And in the bed, impossibly small, lay a boy. His son. Ha-jun. He had Ji-won's eyes. Dark. Serious. Even in sleep, there was something familiar in the shape of his face, the set of his jaw. Jiwon's throat closed. For the first time in years, he didn't know what to do. He looks like you. The voice came from the corner. Jiwon turned. And there she was. Minji. But not the Minji he remembered. Her hair was shorter, sleek. She wore a tailored navy suit, heels, a watch that cost more than most people's cars. Her posture was straight. Her gaze, steady. She wasn't the trembling girl he'd thrown out into the rain. She was something else now. Something unbreakable. "You came," she said quietly. Jiwon's fists clenched at his sides. "You didn't tell me. You didn't want to know." Silence carved the space between them. "I have another child," he said, voice low. "Dangerous." "Yes, a daughter. Seo-yoon." "Where is she?" "Safe. Away from here. Away from you." His jaw worked. "Why didn't you contact me?" Minji stepped closer. Her heels clicked softly against the tile. "Because you told me to disappear, so I did. With my children." "My children," she corrected, ice in her tone. "You gave up that right the night you threw me out." Jiwon's hands shook, not from fear, from rage, from something else he couldn't name. "He's dying." "Yes, and I'm the only match." "Yes." Her eyes didn't waver. Jiwon moved toward her, slow, deliberate, predatory. "So you need me." Minji didn't flinch. "I need your bone marrow, not you." The words were surgical. He stopped inches from her, close enough to see the faint shadows under her eyes, the exhaustion she carried like armor. "What do you want?" he asked. She smiled. It wasn't warm. "Everything you took from me." Jiwon sat across from Minji in a private conference room the hospital had provided. She had requested it. He had agreed. But the air between them was anything but civil. "You built a company," he said. It wasn't a question. He'd done his research on the flight, MK Innovations, a tech firm specializing in AI-driven logistics, worth $200 million. And she was the founder. Minji didn't look impressed by his observation. "I built a life," she corrected. "Something you said I wasn't capable of." Jiwon's fingers drummed once against the table. A rare tell. "I underestimated you." "You discard everything you underestimate." Silence. He leaned back, studying her. This woman, this stranger wearing Minji's face, had survived, thrived, without him. It unsettled him more than he cared to admit. "What's your condition?" he asked. Minji opened a leather folder, pulled out a single sheet of paper, slid it across the table. Jiwon picked it up. His eyes scanned the document. Then stopped. "You want me to give up my empire. Not give up, transfer." His gaze snapped to hers. "To who?" "To Ha-jun, when he turns 18. Jiwon's laugh was low, humorless. "You're insane." "I'm serious." "You want me to hand over everything I've built, my territory, my network, my legacy, to a 6-year-old who doesn't even know I exist?" "Yes." "Why?" Minji leaned forward. "Because you threw us away when it suited you. Now you'll build something for them. Not for yourself. For the children you abandoned." Jiwon's hand crushed the paper. "And if I refuse?" Her eyes were ice. "Then Ha-jun dies, and you'll have to live with that for the rest of your life." Jiwon left the hospital without another word. But he didn't leave New York. He checked into a private suite overlooking Central Park. Seo-jun joined him within the hour. "You look like hell," Seo-jun said, pouring 2 glasses of whiskey. Jiwon didn't respond. He stood at the window, hands in his pockets, staring at the city lights. "She wants me to give up everything." Seo-jun paused mid-pour. "What?" "The empire, the entire network. She wants me to sign it over to my son." "The son you didn't know existed until yesterday." "Yes," Seo-jun whistled low. "That's bold." "It's insane." "Is it?" Jiwon turned. Seo-jun shrugged. "You built that empire for an heir, didn't you? Now you have one." I built it for someone I could train, someone I could shape, not a dying 6-year-old who's been raised to hate me. Does he hate you? Jiwon didn't answer, because he didn't know. He hadn't spoken to Hajun, hadn't even stayed long enough to see him wake up. Seojin set down the glass. Are you going to do it? I don't know. Then figure it out, because if you walk away now, you'll regret it for the rest of your life. Jiwon's jaw clenched. I never regret anything. Seojin smirked. You said that 6 years ago, too. Minji sat beside Hajun's bed, her hand gently smoothing his hair. He stirred, eyes fluttering open. Mama, I'm here, baby. Is he coming back? Minji's chest tightened. Hajun had seen Jiwon, briefly, before Jiwon left. I don't know, she admitted. He looked scary. She smiled sadly. He is. But he looks like me. Minji's throat ached. Yes, he does. Hajun's small hand reached for hers. Do you think he'll help me? She kissed his forehead. I think he will. But she didn't believe it. Not yet. 3 days later, Jiwon returned. This time he brought Seoyun. Minji was sitting in the hospital cafeteria when she saw them enter. Her breath caught. Seoyun. Her daughter held Jiwon's hand, her eyes wide, curious. She wore a yellow dress, her hair in 2 puffy ponytails. She looked so small next to him. Minji stood, heart racing. Jiwon's eyes found hers across the room. He walked toward her, slowly, deliberately. When he stopped in front of her, Seoyun looked up. Mama! Minji crouched down, arms open. Seoyun ran into them. Hi, baby. The man said he's my dad. Minji's eyes flicked up to Jiwon. He didn't look away. He is, Minji said softly. Seoyun pulled back, studying Jiwon with the blunt curiosity of a child. You left us. Jiwon's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. Yes. Why? Minji's heart stopped. Jiwon crouched down to Seoyun's level. Because I made a mistake. A big one? The biggest. Seoyun tilted her head. Are you gonna fix it? Jiwon's gaze shifted to Minji. I'm going to try. Jiwon signed the consent forms for the bone marrow donation the next morning. No hesitation, no negotiation. Dr. Patel seemed surprised. Mr. Kang, you understand this is a serious procedure. I understand. And Ms. Kim's legal terms, I'll handle that separately. The doctor nodded, though her eyes lingered with unspoken questions. Jiwon didn't care. He would save his son, but he wouldn't surrender his empire. Not yet. The procedure was scheduled for the following week. In the days between, Jiwon stayed in New York. He visited Hajun every day. At first, the boy was silent, wary. He watched Jiwon the way someone might watch a dangerous animal, curious but ready to run. Jiwon didn't push. He sat in the corner of the room, quiet, present. On the 3rd day, Hajun spoke. Do you have guards because people want to hurt you? Jiwon glanced at Seojun, stationed by the door. Yes. Why? Because I do things that make people angry. Hajun frowned. Bad things? Jiwon hesitated. Complicated things. Hajun seemed to consider this. Mama says you're powerful. I am. Are you scary? Jiwon looked at the boy, his son, and for the first time in years, he didn't know how to answer. Sometimes, he said finally. Hajun nodded slowly. I'm scared of you. The words landed like stones. Jiwon's jaw tightened. I know. But Mama says you're going to help me. I am. Why? Because you're my son. Hajun blinked. You didn't want me before. Jiwon's chest constricted. I didn't know you existed. Mama says you told her to... Hajun paused, struggling with the word. To not have me. Silence filled the room like smoke. Jiwon didn't lie. I did. Hajun's eyes filled with tears. Why? Jiwon moved closer, slowly, until he was kneeling beside the bed. Because I was a fool. Hajun stared at him. I thought I needed something different, Jiwon continued. Something stronger. I didn't understand what I already had. Mama? Yes. And me and Seoyun? Yes. Hajun wiped his eyes. Are you going to leave again? Jiwon's throat closed. No. Promise? Jiwon reached out, slowly, carefully. He placed his hand over Hajun's small one. I promise. Minji watched from the doorway. She hadn't meant to eavesdrop, but hearing Jiwon's voice, low, careful, almost gentle, had stopped her in her tracks. She'd never heard him sound like that, not once in the 2 years they were married. When Jiwon left the room, he found her waiting in the hallway. They stood in silence. You're good with him, she said finally. I'm trying. He's afraid of you. I know. You can't fix that with promises. Jiwon's eyes darkened. What do you want me to do, Minji? I want you to mean it. I do. Then prove it. How? She stepped closer. Sign the papers. Jiwon's hands clenched. You're asking me to destroy everything I've built. I'm asking you to build something better. For a son I just met. For a son you abandoned. The words were a slap. Jiwon's voice dropped. Dangerous. Controlled. I won't give up my empire. Then you'll lose your son. He's not going to die. I'm donating the marrow. And then what? Minji's voice rose. You save his life and go back to Seoul? Back to your empire, your power, your world? And we go back to pretending you don't exist? What's the alternative? You choose them. Fully. Completely. You don't get to be halfway in their lives, Jiwon. You don't get to play father when it's convenient. Jiwon's jaw worked. You want me to give up everything. I want you to give up control. There's a difference. Not in my world. Then maybe, Minji said softly, you're in the wrong world. The surgery was scheduled for dawn. Jiwon arrived early, dressed in a hospital gown, flanked by Seojun and 2 guards who waited outside. Dr. Patel walked him through the procedure one final time. He barely listened. His mind was on Hajun, on Seoyun, on Minji's eyes when she said, you don't get to be halfway in their lives. When they wheeled him into the operating room, Minji was waiting outside Hajun's room. She didn't say anything, but their eyes met. And for the first time in 6 years, he saw something other than hatred in her gaze. Hope. The surgery took 4 hours. Jiwon woke in a recovery room with fluorescent lights burning overhead and a dull ache radiating through his pelvis. His body felt heavy, disconnected, like he'd been taken apart and poorly reassembled. Seojun was sitting in the corner, scrolling through his phone. You're awake, he said without looking up. Jiwon's voice came out hoarse. Hajun? Still in surgery. They're doing the transplant now. Jiwon closed his eyes. His son was in an operating room, receiving the marrow that might save his life. Marrow that came from him. The father who'd tried to erase him before he was even born. The irony wasn't lost on him. Minji? He asked, outside the OR. She hasn't moved in 3 hours. Jiwon tried to sit up. Pain shot through his lower back. Don't, Seojun warned. Doctor said you need to rest. I need to see him. You can't. Not until he's stable. Jiwon's fists clenched against the thin hospital sheets. He'd built an empire on control, on precision, on making things happen when he wanted them to happen. But here, in this sterile room, he was powerless. And he hated it. 8 hours later, Dr. Patel emerged from the operating room. Minji shot to her feet. She looked like she hadn't slept in days. Her eyes were red-rimmed, her suit wrinkled. How is he? Dr. Patel smiled, tired but genuine. The transplant was successful. Hajun's body is accepting the marrow. We'll need to monitor him closely for the next 72 hours, but he's going to make it. Minji's knees buckled. Seojun caught her before she hit the floor. He's going to make it. she whispered. Then louder, voice breaking. He's going to make it. She collapsed into Seojun's arms, sobbing. Seojun looked uncomfortable but didn't pull away. He glanced toward Jiwon's recovery room, where the door was still closed. You should tell him, he said quietly. Minji pulled back, wiping her eyes. No, let him rest. He's been asking about Hajun every 20 minutes. She hesitated, then nodded. When Minji entered Jiwon's room, he was sitting up, despite the pain etched into his face. Their eyes met. He's okay, she said. Jiwon exhaled. It was the first time she'd seen him look relieved. Dr. Patel said the transplant took. He's going to recover. Jiwon closed his eyes, head falling back against the pillow. Thank you, Minji added softly. He opened his eyes, looked at her. For what? For doing this, for saving him. Jiwon's jaw tightened. He's my son. Yes, but you didn't have to come. You could have ignored the call, pretended we didn't exist, again. The accusation hung in the air. Jiwon's voice was low, controlled. I told you I don't abandon my blood. You did once. I didn't know. You didn't want to know, Minji interrupted. There's a difference. Silence carved through the room. Jiwon stared at her, and for the first time, he didn't have a defense, because she was right. Minji turned to leave, but his voice stopped her. What happens now? She looked back. Now you recover. Hajun recovers. And when you're both strong enough, you go back to Seoul, back to your empire. And you? I stay here, with my children. Our children. Minji's expression hardened. You gave up that right. I'm trying to earn it back. Trying isn't enough, Jiwon. You need to choose. And you've already made your choice. She walked out before he could respond. 2 weeks later, Hajun was moved out of ICU. His color was returning. His energy slowly rebuilding. The doctors were cautiously optimistic. Jiwon visited every day. At first, Hajun was polite but distant. He answered questions in short sentences. Didn't ask any of his own. But gradually, something shifted. One afternoon, Jiwon brought a chessboard. Do you know how to play? He asked. Hajun shook his head. I'll teach you. They sat across from each other, the board between them. Jiwon explained the pieces, the rules, the strategy. Hajun listened intently. Why do you like chess? Hajun asked after a while. Because it's about thinking ahead, anticipating your opponent, controlling the board. Do you always win? Jiwon hesitated. Most of the time. But not always? No, not always. Hajun studied the board. Mama says you're really powerful, but you seem sad. Jiwon's hand froze over a night. Why do you think I'm sad? Hajun shrugged. You don't smile, and your eyes look empty, like you lost something. Jiwon stared at the boy, 6 years old, and he saw things most adults missed. Maybe I did, Jiwon admitted. What did you lose? Jiwon looked at Hajun, really looked at him. You, your sister, your mother. Hajun tilted his head. But we're right here. I know. So you didn't lose us. You just weren't looking. The words hit like a blade. Jiwon set down the chess piece. You're right, he said quietly. Hajun smiled. Small, but real. Maybe you can start looking now. That night, Jiwon sat alone in his hotel suite. Seojun had returned to Seoul to manage operations. The guards remained outside. The city stretched out below him, glittering and indifferent. His phone buzzed. A message from his second-in-command back home. Rival family making moves. They know you're distracted. We need you back. Jiwon stared at the screen. His empire was fracturing. Territory disputes, power vacuums, rivals sensing weakness. He could fix it. He always did. But it would mean leaving. Leaving Hajun. Leaving Seoyun. Leaving Minji. He thought about Hajun's words. You just weren't looking. Jiwon stood, walked to the window, and made a decision. The next morning, Minji found Jiwon in the hospital cafeteria. He looked different, sharper, resolved. "We need to talk," he said. She sat across from him, guarded. "About what?" "Your condition, the empire transfer." Minji's eyes narrowed. "You're not going to do it." "No, I am." She froze. "What?" Jiwon pulled out a folder, slid it across the table. "I've drafted the paperwork. Everything transfers to Hajun when he turns 18. Until then, it's held in trust. You'll be the trustee." Minji stared at the documents like they might explode. "You're serious?" "Yes." "Why?" Jiwon leaned back. "Because my son told me I wasn't looking, and he was right." Minji's throat tightened. "I built that empire for an heir," Jiwon continued. "But I built it the wrong way, with fear, with control, with violence. I don't want Hajun to inherit that. I want him to inherit something better." "And you think you can build something better?" "No." Jiwon's eyes met hers. "I think we can." Minji's breath caught. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying I'm staying. In New York. With you. With them." "You're giving up Seoul?" "I'm giving up the old empire. I'm not giving up my family." Tears welled in Minji's eyes, but she blinked them back. "You don't get to just walk back into our lives, Jiwon. I know. You hurt me. You destroyed me. I know. And you think signing a piece of paper fixes that?" "No." His voice was steady. "Certain. But it's a start." Minji looked down at the contract. At the signature line. At the man across from her who'd once thrown her into the rain. And now sat here, offering her everything. "I don't trust you," she whispered. "I don't expect you to. Not yet." "Then what do you expect?" Jiwon reached across the table. Slowly. Carefully. His hand covered hers. "A chance." Minji didn't answer right away. She pulled her hand back, folded it in her lap, and stared at the contract Jiwon had placed between them. "A chance," she repeated. "That's what you're asking for." "Yes." "You realize how insane that sounds, right? 6 years ago, you told me I wasn't good enough to carry your child. You threw me out like I was nothing, and now you want a chance?" Jiwon didn't flinch. "Yes." Minji laughed bitterly. "You haven't changed? You're wrong." His voice was quiet, firm. "I have. Signing a paper doesn't make you a different person, Jiwon. No. But realizing I was wrong does." She looked up at him, searching his face for the lie, for the manipulation, for the cold calculation she'd seen so many times before. But all she saw was exhaustion, and something that looked dangerously close to regret. "I don't believe you," she said. "Then watch me prove it." Over the next 3 weeks, Jiwon stayed in New York. He moved out of the luxury hotel and into a modest apartment 10 minutes from the hospital. No guards stationed outside, no entourage, just him. Seojin called him 17 times in the first week. "You're killing us," Seojin said on the phone. "The Park family is moving into our Western territory. They think you're weak." "Let them think that." "Jiwon." "I said let them. You're going to lose everything." "No. I'm going to choose what matters." Seojin went quiet. Then, "You've really lost your mind, haven't you?" "Maybe." "What do I tell the others?" "Tell them I'm building something new." "And if they don't believe you?" Jiwon's voice hardened. "Then they're not loyal, and loyalty is the only thing I've ever valued." Hajun was discharged from the hospital on a Tuesday morning. Minji signed the final release forms while Jiwon waited in the hallway with Seoyun, who was bouncing on her toes, excited to have her brother home. When the nurse wheeled Hajun out, he looked small but alive. His cheeks had color again. His eyes sparkled. "Seoyun," he called. She ran to him, throwing her arms around his neck. "Careful," Minji warned, but she was smiling. Jiwon watched from a distance. Hajun looked up, met his eyes. Are you coming home with us? The question hung in the air. Minji stiffened. She hadn't discussed this with Jiwon. Hadn't even considered it. Jiwon crouched down to Hajun's level. Do you want me to? Hajun glanced at his mother, then back at Jiwon. I don't know yet, he said honestly. But maybe you could visit, so I can decide? Jiwon's lips twitched, almost a smile. That sounds fair. Hajun nodded solemnly. Okay, but you have to bring ice cream. Deal. Minji's apartment was a penthouse in Tribeca. Sleek, modern, full of light. The opposite of the cold marble fortress Jiwon had kept in Seoul. Seoyun gave him a tour, chattering about her favorite spots. Her art corner, the reading nook, the balcony where she and Hajun watched the sunset. Jiwon listened, observed. This was their world, a world he'd never been part of. Later, after the kids were in bed, Minji poured herself a glass of wine and stood on the balcony. Jiwon joined her. For a long time, neither spoke. They're happy here, Jiwon said finally. Yes, you built a good life for them. I did what I had to, without me. Minji sipped her wine. You made that choice. I know. She turned to look at him. Why are you really here, Jiwon? And don't tell me it's just about Hajun. You saved his life. You signed the papers. You could have gone back to Seoul. Jiwon stared out at the city. I could have, he admitted, but I didn't want to. Why not? He turned to face her. His expression was unguarded in a way she'd never seen. Because for the first time in my life, I don't want power. I want this. This? A family. A life that isn't built on fear. Minji's chest tightened. You don't get to have that just because you want it. I know. You have to earn it, every single day. I will. And if you fail? Then I lose everything that actually matters. Minji's eyes glistened. She looked away, blinking hard. You broke me once, Jiwon. I won't let you do it again. I won't. You don't know that. No, he agreed. But I'm going to try anyway. The next 2 months were strange. Jiwon visited the apartment 3 times a week. He brought ice cream, like he'd promised. He played chess with Hajun, who was getting better. He sat with Seoyun while she painted, listening to her explain the colors and shapes with the seriousness of a trained artist. He didn't push, didn't demand, didn't try to control. He just showed up. Minji watched him carefully, waiting for the mask to slip, for the cold, calculating man to reemerge. But he didn't. One evening, after the kids were asleep, Jiwon helped her clean up the kitchen. It was absurdly domestic. You're getting soft, Minji teased, handing him a dish to dry. Maybe. The great King Jiwon drying dishes. Your enemies would have a field day. Let them. She glanced at him. You really don't care anymore, do you? I care, he said, just not about the same things. What changed? Jiwon set down the dish, turned to face her. I almost lost my son, and I realized none of it mattered. The power, the empire, the fear. If I'd lost him, I would have had nothing. You would have had soul. Soul is empty. Minji's breath caught. Jiwon stepped closer. You asked me once what I wanted, he said quietly. I told you I wanted a son. I was wrong. What do you want now? His eyes held hers. I want forgiveness. Minji's throat closed. I don't know if I can give you that. I know. You destroyed me, Jiwon. You made me feel worthless. I know. And now you expect me to just, what? Forget? No. I expect you to let me spend the rest of my life making up for it. Tears slid down her cheeks. Jiwon reached up, gently wiped them away. I was a fool, he whispered. And I'm sorry. Minji closed her eyes. For 6 years, she'd imagined this moment. Imagined him crawling back, begging, broken. But this wasn't that. This was something quieter, more real, and infinitely more terrifying. Because if she let him in again, If she gave him her heart again? She didn't know if she'd survive losing him a second time. I need time, she whispered. Take all the time you need. I mean it, Jiwon. I can't rush this. I'm not asking you to. She opened her eyes, met his gaze. What if I never forgive you? Jiwon's jaw tightened, but his voice was steady. Then I'll spend the rest of my life earning it anyway. 6 months later, Hajun's hair had grown back. Thick, dark, just like his father's. He sat at the kitchen table, hunched over a chessboard, brow furrowed in concentration. His tongue poked out slightly as he studied the pieces, a habit that made him look even younger than his 6 years. Across from him, Jiwon waited patiently, hands folded, expression neutral. But there was warmth in his eyes now. Something that hadn't been there before. Don't rush, Jiwon said quietly. Think 3 moves ahead. Hajun's small fingers hovered over his knight. He bit his lip, glanced at his father, then back at the board. Finally, he moved the piece. Jiwon studied the board, then smiled. Good. Did I win? Not yet, but you're learning. That's better than winning. Hajun frowned. How is losing better than winning? Because losing teaches you what winning can't. It shows you where you're weak, where you need to grow. Hajun considered this seriously. Is that why you lost us? So you could learn? The question hit like a physical blow. Jiwon's breath caught. He set down the bishop he'd been holding, met his son's eyes. Yes, he said honestly. I lost you because I didn't know how to be the father you needed. But I'm learning now. Hajun nodded slowly. Okay, but don't lose us again. I won't. Promise? Jiwon reached across the board, placed his hand over Hajun's small one. I promise. Seoyun wandered in from the living room, carrying a drawing. Her pigtails bounced as she skipped toward them. Look what I made. Jiwon set down his chess piece, gave her his full attention. Show me. She held up a crayon portrait. 4 stick figures holding hands under a bright yellow sun. Labels underneath in wobbly letters. Mama, Hajun, Seoyun, Appa. Jiwon's chest tightened. It's us, Seoyun announced proudly. We're a family now, right? Jiwon glanced toward the doorway where Minji stood, arms crossed, watching them. She wore jeans and an oversized sweater, hair pulled back in a ponytail. She looked younger, lighter. Like the weight she'd carried for 6 years had finally begun to lift. Their eyes met. She didn't say anything, but there was something soft in her expression. Something that looked dangerously close to trust. Jiwon turned back to Seoyun. Yes, he said quietly. We're a family. Seoyun beamed. Then you have to hang this on the fridge. That's what families do. Then that's what we'll do. Seoyun grabbed his hand, tugging him toward the kitchen. Jiwon let himself be pulled, and for a moment, he marveled at how something so simple, hanging a child's drawing on a refrigerator, could feel more significant than any deal he'd ever closed, any territory he'd ever claimed. This was what he'd been missing. This was what mattered. Later that evening, after the kids were in bed, Minji and Jiwon sat on the balcony. It had become their ritual over the past 6 months. A glass of wine, the city lights stretching endlessly below, silence that didn't feel empty anymore. The air was cool. Autumn was settling over New York, painting the trees in shades of amber and rust. Minji wrapped her cardigan tighter around herself, staring out at the skyline. Seojun called today, Jiwon said, breaking the quiet. And? The Seoul operation is stable. They don't need me anymore. Minji turned to look at him. You really walked away. I told you I would. I know. She paused, searching for words. I didn't believe you'd actually do it. Jiwon set down his glass. Do you believe me now? Minji studied him for a long moment. His face was different than it had been 6 months ago. The hardness had softened. The coldness had thawed. He looked human. I'm starting to, she admitted. Jiwon exhaled slowly. Relief. Gratitude. That's enough for me. Minji smiled. Small, but real. The kids love you, you know. I love them too. Hajun told me yesterday that you're his best friend. Jiwon's throat tightened. He said that? Yes. He also said you're terrible at letting him win at chess. Jiwon laughed. Actual laughter. Deep and genuine. Minji hadn't heard that sound in years. Maybe ever. I'm teaching him strategy. Winning doesn't teach you anything. Spoken like a former crime lord. Former, Jiwon emphasized. That life is over. Is it? Minji's voice was quieter now. You really don't miss it? Jiwon leaned back in his chair, gazing out at the city. Sometimes, he admitted. I miss the control, the certainty, knowing exactly where I stood and what I was capable of. But none of it was real. It was built on fear, on violence, on making people submit. And at the end of the day, I was alone. Completely alone. Minji's chest ached. You were never alone, Jiwon. You had me. I threw you away. Yes, you did. He turned to face her, and in his eyes she saw something she'd never seen before. Regret. Real, unfiltered regret. I was a coward, he said. I thought power meant control. I thought strength meant never needing anyone. But I was wrong. Real strength is admitting when you're wrong. Real power is choosing love over fear. Minji's eyes glistened. When did you become so wise? When I almost lost everything that mattered. She reached out, brushed a strand of hair from his forehead. You're different, she whispered. I can see it. Is that a good thing? I think so. I'm still figuring it out. Jiwon caught her hand, held it gently against his cheek. Take all the time you need. 3 months later, Jiwon was in the kitchen making breakfast when Minji emerged from the bedroom, phone pressed to her ear. Yes, that's correct. The investment goes through the new ethics division. No exceptions. She paused, listening. I don't care what the board says. If they don't like it, they can find another CEO. She ended the call, tossed the phone onto the counter. Jiwon raised an eyebrow. Trouble? Just investors who don't understand that profit isn't the only thing that matters. You sound like me, the old me. Minji smirked. Except I'm right, and you were just terrifying. Fair point. She poured herself coffee, leaned against the counter. How are you adjusting? She asked. To the quiet life? Jiwon flipped a pancake. It's strange, but good. You don't miss the chaos? I miss the purpose, but I'm finding new purpose here. In pancakes? In mornings. In being present. In watching Seo-yoon paint and teaching Hajun chess. He hesitated. In being someone worth coming home to. Minji's expression softened. You are, she said quietly. You really are. That afternoon, Jiwon took the kids to Central Park. Hajun wanted to feed the ducks. Seo-yoon wanted to climb trees. Jiwon let them do both. He sat on a bench, watching Seo-yoon scramble up an oak tree with the fearlessness of someone who'd never been told she couldn't. Hajun crouched by the pond, carefully tearing bread into small pieces for the ducks. A woman sat down beside him. Older, gray-haired, kind eyes. Beautiful children, she said. Thank you. Are they yours? Jiwon paused. Then, yes, they are. The woman smiled. You're lucky. I can tell they adore you. Jiwon watched Seo-yoon wave at him from a tree branch, her grin so wide it made his chest ache. I'm the lucky one, he said. The woman nodded knowingly. That's how you know you're a good father, when you realize they're the gift, not the burden. After she left, Jiwon sat in silence, those words echoing in his mind. They're the gift, not the burden. For so long, he'd seen children as a means to an end, an heir, a legacy, a way to extend his empire beyond his own mortality. But Hajun and Seo-yoon weren't extensions of him. They were their own people. Bright, curious, full of potential. And his job wasn't to mold them into what he wanted. It was to protect them, to guide them, to love them unconditionally. He was still learning, but he was trying. 6 months later, it was Minji's birthday. Jiwon had spent weeks planning. He'd consulted Seo-yoon, who insisted on balloons, Ha-jun, who wanted chocolate cake, and even Seo-jun, who'd flown in from Seoul for the occasion. The apartment was decorated simply but thoughtfully. Fairy lights strung across the living room. A table set with Minji's favorite flowers, white peonies. Dinner prepared by Jiwon himself, with significant help from a YouTube tutorial. When Minji came home from work, she froze in the doorway. "Surprise!" Seo-yoon and Ha-jun shouted in unison. Minji's hands flew to her mouth. "You did all this?" Jiwon stepped forward, slightly nervous. "The kids helped. I picked the balloons," Seo-yoon announced. "I made the card," Ha-jun added, holding up a construction paper masterpiece covered in glitter. Minji's eyes filled with tears. I don't know what to say." Jiwon smiled. "You don't have to say anything." They ate dinner together, laughed, told stories. Seo-jun entertained the kids with exaggerated tales of Jiwon's boring corporate life in Seoul, which made even Jiwon laugh. After the kids went to bed, Seo-jun excused himself, leaving Jiwon and Minji alone. They stood on the balcony, their spot, under a sky full of stars. Jiwon handed her a small box. Minji looked at it, then at him. "Jiwon, it's not what you think." She opened it slowly. Inside was a key. "What's this?" "A key to my apartment." Minji blinked. "You want me to have a key to your apartment?" "No." Jiwon smiled. "I want you to know that my door is always open, that I'm not going anywhere, that this, us, the kids, this life, is permanent. For me." Minji stared at the key, tears streaming down her face. "I don't know if I'm ready." "I know, and that's okay. I'm not asking you to move forward faster than you're comfortable with. I'm just telling you. I'm here. Whenever you're ready." Minji set the box down, turned to face him fully. "You've changed," she whispered. "Completely. You changed me." "No, you changed yourself." Jiwon cupped her face gently, thumbs brushing away her tears. "I love you," he said. "I should have said it 6 years ago. I should have fought for you, for us. I didn't, and I'll regret that for the rest of my life. But I'm saying it now. I love you. And I'll keep saying it until you believe me." Minji's breath hitched. "I don't know if I can say it back yet." "I know. I'm still scared. I know. But..." She placed her hands over his. "I want to try. I want to believe in us again." Jiwon closed his eyes, pressed his forehead against hers. "That's all I need." 1 year later, the apartment was chaos. Ha-jun and Seo-yoon chased each other around the living room, shrieking with laughter. A soccer ball ricocheted off the couch. A tower of blocks collapsed. Minji stood in the kitchen, frosting a cake. Chocolate. 3 layers. Ha-jun's favorite. Jiwon wrapped his arms around her waist from behind, resting his chin on her shoulder. "Need help?" "You're terrible at frosting." "True, but I make excellent taste tester." She laughed, leaning back into him. "Comfortable. Safe. Home." "Are you happy?" he asked quietly. Minji set down the spatula, turned in his arms. "Yes," she said. "I am." Jiwon smiled, genuine, unguarded. The kind of smile that reached his eyes and made him look 10 years younger. "Good. Are you?" He looked around the apartment. At the chaos, the noise, the life they'd built together. "More than I ever thought possible." Minji kissed him, soft, sweet, full of promise and hope and a future neither of them had believed in a year ago. When they pulled apart, Seo-yoon was standing in the doorway, grinning. "Ew, you guys are kissing again." Ha-jun appeared beside her, wrinkling his nose. Does this mean Appa is staying forever? Jiwon crouched down, eye level with both of them. Do you want me to? Both kids nodded vigorously. Then yes, I'm staying forever. Seo-yoon launched herself into his arms. Ha-jun followed a second later, and Jiwon held them both, his eyes meeting Minji's over their heads. She smiled, tears in her eyes, but happy tears this time. And in that moment, surrounded by laughter and love and the family he'd almost destroyed, Jiwon realized something profound. He'd spent his entire life building an empire. But this was his real legacy. Not power, not fear, not control. Love. Epilogue. 3 years later, Ha-jun stood at the front of the auditorium, diploma in hand, cap slightly crooked on his head. Middle school graduation. He looked older now, taller, his features sharpening into the young man he was becoming. But when he smiled, he still looked like the 6-year-old boy who'd asked Jiwon if he was staying forever. Minji dabbed her eyes with a tissue, mascara already smudged. Jiwon squeezed her hand, his own throat tight with emotion. Seo-yoon, now 9 and sitting between them, bounced excitedly. That's my brother. We know, sweetheart, Minji whispered. But maybe use your inside voice. But I'm proud, Jiwon smiled, pulling her close. You can be loud. Just this once. After the ceremony, they took pictures, hundreds of them. Ha-jun looked embarrassed but pleased, standing between his parents, one arm around Seo-yoon. Speech! Speech! Seo-yoon chanted. There was already a speech, Ha-jun protested. I want a brother speech. Ha-jun rolled his eyes but smiled. Fine. Thank you to Mom for being the strongest person I know. Thank you to Seo-yoon for being annoying but also my best friend. Hey. And thank you to Dad for being here. For teaching me chess and business and how to think before I act. Jiwon's vision blurred. I'm proud of you, he said, voice rough. Thanks, Dad. The words still hit him every single time. Dad. Not Jiwon. Not the man who hurt Mom. Dad. Later at dinner, Ha-jun leaned forward, expression serious. Dad, can you teach me more about business? I want to learn how to run a company, a real one, like Mom's. Jiwon glanced at Minji. She nodded, smiling. Of course, Jiwon said. But we're going to do it the right way. No shortcuts, no fear, no using people. Just hard work, integrity, and making sure what you build actually helps people. Like Mom's AI ethics division? Exactly like that. Ha-jun grinned. Cool, can we start tomorrow? Slow down, Minji laughed. You just graduated middle school. But I want to be ready. By the time I'm 18, I'll have the empire Dad signed over to me. I need to know how to run it. Jiwon's chest swelled with pride. His son wasn't interested in power for power's sake. He wanted to build something meaningful, something good. Then we'll start tomorrow, Jiwon agreed. But first, we celebrate tonight. They raised their glasses. Water for the kids, wine for the adults. To Ha-jun, Minji said. To new beginnings, Jiwon added. To family, Seo-yoon declared. They clinked glasses, and in that moment, everything felt complete. That night, Minji and Jiwon stood on the balcony one last time, wrapped in each other's arms. The city stretched out below them, glittering and alive. Do you ever regret it? Minji asked. Giving up Seoul, the empire, everything you built? Jiwon was quiet for a moment. Then he kissed the top of her head. Not even once. Really? Minji, I spent 33 years building something that meant nothing. I had power, but I was empty. I had an empire, but I was alone. He pulled back, looked into her eyes. Now I have you. I have Ha-jun. I have Seo-yoon. I have a life that actually means something. You became a better man, she whispered. You made me want to be a better man. Minji smiled, tears slipping down her cheeks. I love you, Jiwon. It was the first time she'd said it. Really said it. without hesitation, without fear. Jiwon's breath caught, his eyes closed, and he pulled her impossibly closer. "I love you too," he whispered. "Thank you for giving me a second chance. Thank you for believing I could change." "You didn't just change," Minji said. "You became the man I always knew you could be." They stood there in silence, holding each other under the stars, and somewhere in the apartment behind them, they could hear Hajun and Seoyun laughing, the sound of family filling the spaces that had once been so empty. Jiwon had spent his entire life chasing power, but he'd found something far greater. He'd found home. He'd found love. He'd found redemption. And in the arms of the woman he'd once thrown away, surrounded by the children he'd almost destroyed, Kang Jiwon finally understood what it meant to truly live. Not as a king, not as a conqueror, but as a father, a husband, a man worthy of the family he'd been given. And that was the greatest empire he could ever build.